We do. We're carrying on this series in 1 Thessalonians, and we're asking some questions about what we might learn. And we talked about faith and hope and love last week. We had a look at exactly where Thessalonica is. We have a map because everyone loves a map. There we go. You can see Thessalonica in the northern part of Greece there. And Paul is writing this from Corinth, which isn't actually on the map, but is just due west of Athens, which you can see at the bottom. So he's there writing to them up in Thessalonica. And he's writing because he's had this report that's come back. If you go to the next map, we've got two maps in 1 week. He's writing this report because he had left Timothy to come through from Macedonia, and he brought a report from Thessalonica to him, and on hearing that report he wanted to write back. And last week we saw that in chapter 1 he spends most of it giving thanks for the way that the Thessalonians' faith has been strengthened and how they have continued to follow Jesus even under significant persecution. And what we discover this week is we're going to see that he shifts his kind of focus. So he started off talking about this is what the Thessalonians are doing and this is how you're behaving and how you're doing. And then he goes back and he says that I want to remind you of how I was when we were among you. See, one of the questions we ask about almost everything today is, can I trust this person? Are they trustworthy? We ask it about politicians, and we're often probably slightly despairing. We ask it about journalists. We ask it about charities. And sadly, sometimes we even have to ask it about church leaders too. You see, it's not enough for someone to be successful or for someone just to have a following. It's not enough for someone to simply get results. We want to know what's going on underneath. What are their motives? Why are they doing this? Can they be trusted? And as we come to 1 Thessalonians 2, that's really the issue Paul is dealing with. It seems as though what's happened is that when Paul has left, and if you remember what we talked about last week, Paul had to be smuggled out at night because there was a great deal of persecution happening and there was going to be a riot. And so they managed to get him out. And what seems to be happening is that people have come along and gone, he was just like all these other people who come along, these charlatans who are just trying to get you to behave in their way so they can get rich and so that they can get all the kudos for having had some followers. And Paul's writing back saying, absolutely not. I am trustworthy. He's looking at a church that's been wonderfully transformed by the gospel. There's real fruit. Lives have been changed. But he wants them to understand that the fruit didn't come because he was able to manipulate them or because he was greedy or because he has a big ego or because he was using power. It came because faithful gospel ministry from people whose lives matched their message. That's what we're going to see today. We're going to see it in three sections. We're going to talk about fruitfulness, we're going to talk about behaviour, and then we're going to talk about thanksgiving. That's the three kind of movements that we see in this text in chapter 2. Fruitfulness. There was fruit in their time from their time in Thessalonica. The very first verse here, you know, brothers and sisters, that our visit to you was not without results. Paul, when he was there, was successful. What he did was successful. He told people about Jesus and people came to faith. People turned, it says, from their idols to following Jesus. There was good fruit. But it was not just that there was fruit. It matters to Paul how they got that fruit. You see, he goes through this whole first section in chapter 2, listing ways in which he wants them to understand he didn't get this fruit. It's kind of an odd way to argue. The appeal we make does not spring from error or impure motives, nor are we trying to trick you. You know we never used flattery, nor did we put on a mask to cover up greed. God is our witness. That reminds me of the joke I tell about dentists. That's why they wear a mask, because they're about to rob you of all your money. But Heather probably doesn't like that joke. Sorry. But that's the image that's being used. They're putting on a mask, someone wearing a mask so that they can be greedy and take your take your money. And he's saying these are not the reasons that we did this. We're not looking for praise from people, not from you or anyone else. And finally, he says, even though as apostles we could have asserted our authority, in other words, we didn't use our power to do this. You see, fruitfulness matters, but it matters how you get fruitfulness. If you do it through trickery or flattery or greed or power, then the fruit itself is tainted. And so Paul wants to remind them, look, that's not what you've given your life to. What you've given your life to is pure fruit. And he says, rather, it was because of the help of God and because of the approval of God and because of the message that God has entrusted to Paul and to his colleagues. This is the reason that there is fruit. With the help of God, in verse 2, it says, we dared to tell you this gospel. We are not trying to please people, but God. Friends, this matters. Karen's just been telling us about what we heard at Canopy, the idea that people are out there really looking for answers to what they do in the complexity of the life. Bible sales in the UK are up 134% since 2019. We know, of course, 2020, something significant happened, and it appears that it's had a huge shift in the cultural and spiritual atmosphere in our nation. Now, those people aren't coming to church yet. The evidence doesn't say that at all. There are dribs and drabs and little bits and pieces. But there's huge interest in reading the Bible. Now, what people are doing with that, we don't know. But there's huge interest in it across the spectrum, from everything from two of the largest podcasts in the world actively exploring Christian faith. Joe Rogan, who's had all sorts of different people on, but particularly a guy called Wes Huff, who's a Canadian apologist. And then The Diary of a CEO, which is a British-based one, Stephen Bartlett, he also had Wes Huff on, but he had John Lennox on this past week. John Lennox is, I would have always just called him a thinker, a Christian thinker. He's a remarkable man. I think he's a professor of mathematics at Cambridge University. But he's a beautiful Christian man, really gentle. And he goes on, and these are not 15 minutes, tell me what you think kind of podcasts. They're 2.5 hours long, going into the depths of their questions. And these are literally the two most popular podcasts. If you don't listen to podcasts and you think, oh, that means it's half a dozen weirdos. These are tens of millions of people listening to these podcasts every week. It's utterly remarkable. And then there's lots of other places that we see this to be true. People are asking questions, but they're not coming here. Now, if they were to come here, I don't know what we would say. Because some of the things that the questions are asking, you're like, that's bananas. Like, genuinely, what we're not saying is that all the lovely ideas that are out there are good ideas. But there is an answer in the scriptures. There is hope. But we're not just looking for fruit, friends. We're not just going to become this super shiny, polished place that people can come into and they can just get their answers and go off and live. No, we're a community of faith. It's a bit messy. We bump up against one another. We learn how to do this Jesus thing by living together. And why does that matter? Because it means the fruit is not because there's some brilliant preacher at the front or some utterly spectacular, well-polished people in the chairs. It's actually because the fruit comes because the gospel of God is powerful, because God himself is at work. How we arrive at the fruitfulness will matter. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't prepare ourselves, and I was enormously challenged by what we heard from Andrew Ollerton yesterday, that what we do here when we love the Bible here, right? We enjoy sitting under teaching, and whether it's mine or other people's. It's great. We're really fortunate to do that. It seems to be a grace that God has given us. And I often talk about it as the fact that we want this to be a place of devotion. We want to learn the scriptures so that we'll love Jesus more. And that's true. But the thing that I took away from yesterday, and what I want to encourage us as we think about this question of where the fruitfulness comes from, is that actually we also need to be learning the Bible for the good of others. Because just because people are out there reading the Bible, who else is going to explain it to them? I mean, does anybody in here have no questions about the Bible? You've got it sorted. Right? And presumably, we're the quote-unquote experts on the Bible. Like, if you were just a random punter who's wondering about what's happening in life, and you listen to your Stephen Bartlett podcast, and he talks about the Bible, and you think, well, I'll give that a shot. And, I mean, it's a book, right? So where do you start? You start at the beginning, right? And then after about a week, you've lost the will to live, because you're somewhere in the middle of Leviticus and going, What would you do? Maybe you remember that slightly strange person who's at your work, who goes to church every Sunday. Or the person that lives down the street from you who once told you about being a Christian. Maybe you're going to go to them and say, I'm reading this book thing, this Bible thing, but I'm a bit lost. What do I do with it? Maybe our Sundays here are partly about so that we can talk about that, where we can offer life and hope to people who say, like, what does it mean when he says this? Or it could be as simple as saying, yeah, give up with that Leviticus thing for just now. Why don't you try the Gospel of Mark? Just be a roadmap for people through the Bible. How we get to the fruit matters. So actually preparing ourselves to be good people who can harvest fruit healthfully really, really matters. How we use power, whether we simply have eloquent words or are trusting in the gospel. Heaven forbid that someone should think that we're doing it just for the money, although that's a bit awkward today. If you're a visitor here, you rock up and we're like, here's your money. We need to be clear that our motives are pure, and the goal is not that we would be famous, but that Jesus would be famous and people's lives would be blessed because of that. That's our goal. How we get to the fruit really matters. It mattered for Paul, and it matters for us. And so how do we go on about doing that? Well, it's about how we behave. It's not the words we use, it's how we live. It's the same message that was in 1 Thessalonians chapter 1. But Paul uses three images here. First of all, he begins with saying, instead we were like young children among you. And then he goes on to say, just as a nursing mother cares for her children. And then finally he says, for you know we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children. This is how they behaved among them. What's he mean? Well, first of all, the children one. It's about innocence. He's like, we were innocent among you. We were blameless among you. We were powerless among you. There's a beautiful simplicity to children, right? They just go, yeah, whatever. It's awesome. There's an innocence to them. And Paul's saying, we were just innocent among you. We weren't trying to manipulate you or make something happen. And then he says, they were like a mother, particularly a nursing mother, who brings care and nurture and protection and sustenance. He says here, sharing not just the gospel, but our very selves. There's something incredibly intimate here from the nursing mother analogy. The nursing mother is very much herself giving of herself to a baby, that the baby would be nourished. This is what Paul's saying. We gave everything we had so that you would grow. That's all we wanted to do. And Paul suggests that that's how they lived. And frankly, it's a challenge for us because it's not enough for us simply to deliver good information to people. We need to embody good news. What does it look like? If people turn up here with their questions, people turn up here with their complicated lives, what does it look like? It looks like opening our homes. It looks like giving our time freely. It looks like carrying one another's burdens. It looks like letting people see our weaknesses. Oh, heaven forbid. I'm not perfect. I know that's very difficult to believe. It looks like being actively present with people. Friends, these are the ways in which we get to live out being a nursing mother among people, where we give our very selves, not just our words. And you know the great news? You're already brilliant at this. You're so good at this. The testimony we heard this morning testified to how the church has been so kind to Mark recently. Generosity, hospitality, availability, a commitment with time. Friends, we get to do this in a way that is a blessing to others. This is how we are supposed to behave. And finally, he uses the example of being a father, of encouraging, comforting, and urging. There is something slightly stereotypical about the way Paul writes this that, frankly, I think if he was writing in the 21st century, he'd get in trouble for. You know, the mother's the nice, caring, nurturing one, and the dad's the one going, "Come on, son, you can do better." But that's the image that he's using. He's playing with, he's urging, comforting, encouraging them on. Towards what? It's brilliant. He says, towards lives worthy of God. This is what we're supposed to spur one another on towards, lives worthy of God. The very thing that they have been demonstrating. So they're showing them what it is and then saying, come on, this is the best way to live. Come and follow us. Come and do this. But once again, we recognize words are not enough. The way they lived among them was the critical thing. About nearly 7 years ago, 2019, our leadership team went away for the day to have a chat about kind of where were we going as a church, what was God calling us into, what were we going to do. And we started having a conversation about how we were going to put together a vision and values document, and we eventually started talking about purpose and practices, and we spent a long time talking about it. And one of the things that really grabbed us was this idea of us as a church having practices that we committed to, because we wanted to recognize that the problem with having a vision and values statement is it's great, right? It's really good. You go, well, we are this, or we're going to be this, and these are the things that we value. But really quickly, something like that can get written on a piece of paper and put in a drawer, and we forget about it. The idea about practices were these were things we actually did, things that we would actually engage with. So it's the very first one is we will meet together. Well, that's good because we do this. But we talked about it being multi-generational, and we talked about it being something we did regularly, and that became really important for us. And we talked about loving one another, and we talked about forgiving one another. Goodness me, that's a challenging one. We talked about challenging one another and encouraging one another. But we also reversed them, because many of us are really good at, I'd be quite happy to encourage you or occasionally to challenge you, but please don't do that to me. Like, we are Scottish after all. I don't want any encouragement. Misery is my base level. And so we came up with these practices. And we didn't talk about it in the context of 1 Thessalonians, but we probably should have done. Because the whole point of those practices is to say it's not enough to say that we're going to love God and love others, which is our purpose statement. We have to much more say, this is how we're going to do it. This is how we work it out. And honestly, it's awesome as a church. If we go through those practices to be able to stand here, I could easily go around and say, oh yeah, you live that out. We can see that over here. And we can see this one over here and this one over here. It's wonderful. Wonderful. We might do that one Sunday. We should do that one Sunday. Yeah, that'll be fun. Because then we'd be able to finish with thanksgiving, which is exactly where Paul finishes up. They had received the gospel as the word of God, which was powerful. And in doing so, he says this slightly quirky thing, that they became imitators of God's churches in Judea, in other words, in Jerusalem. And what does he mean by that? It means that they're under persecution, exactly like that. Now, I don't know if you have any churches that are kind of like up there. Like they're like, that's the best church. Like, this place is great, and I know you all think this is the best church, but apart from that, there might be occasionally a church that you think, oh, those guys are smashing it. They're doing just a brilliant job. It could be somewhere else in the world, and actually, I think for me at the moment, there's a church in Ukraine that it was a church plant just a few years ago, and it's doing remarkable things. And as a Baptist Union, a whole family of churches, we've been supporting that work over the last 3 or 4 years. In the midst of a war, This young man has planted this church, and they've got a couple of hundred people coming now. They're baptizing people. They've got amazing ministry among young folks and young families. It's remarkable in the middle of a war. Truly remarkable. If you were to write, if someone was to write to us and say, you have become like Pastor Yura's church in Ukraine, I'd be like, that's cool. That's something good for us to aspire to. These guys get a letter that says, you have become imitators of the church in Jerusalem. Like, can you imagine? Like that's a pretty big up. Like, awesome, great job. He is proud of them. He's like, well done, guys. I want you to know I'm proud of you. I have the joy of going all around the country, and I'm always boasting about the things you guys are doing. Like the people who come out every Saturday morning to serve tea and coffee to all sorts of different people, and to give them a place of welcome and hospitality every Saturday morning in our church. Wonderful. People getting baptized in the sea. People are like, you do it in the sea, is it not cold? I'm like, I don't know, I only get up to my knees. You know, Paul is boasting about these people. He thinks they're wonderful. In fact, he goes so far as to say this. He says, they are the crown that he will glory in. It says this, for what is our hope, our joy, or the crown in which we will glory in the presence of our Lord Jesus Christ when he comes? Is it not you? Is it not you? He isn't, when Jesus comes, he's not going to say, hey, I learned all these brilliant sermons. I memorized the whole of the Old Testament. I wrote these incredible letters, Jesus. They're really cool. You should do something with these. He says, look at these folks. Look at these people. Aren't they beautiful? And he isn't talking about a building they built. He's not talking about the programs they ran. He's not talking about how many churches they planted. He's talking about the people. He's saying, aren't they beautiful? Jesus, look at this. This is the crown of all the things I want to give to you. It's these people. Real people whose lives have been changed by Jesus. This is it. Just our little church here. What are we ever going to give to Jesus? We go, look at these people. Like, Nick. Jesus, look, Nick. He's amazing. I just said that because I wasn't sure if he was playing Angry Birds or something on his phone or taking notes. But we could go, this is what he's like, these guys, you guys, you are such a delight to me and to the leaders, but to Jesus. You know, people often say, well, you know, you might as well spend it because you can't take it with you. You know, like, there's no point getting super rich and having all these things because you can't take any of it with you. There's one thing you can take with you. People. People. The people that you share your life with, the people that you share the gospel of God with, they will be with Jesus. You'll be able to say, Jesus, look at these people. What did I do with my life? These people. This person. It's amazing that he does that, right? I mean, he had so much to boast about. He says this elsewhere in his letters. There's so many things he could boast about. And at this point, all he's saying is, look at these guys. Look at these guys. Friends, I want you to know that's how much Paul loved the church in Thessalonica. All he's doing is reflecting how much Jesus loved them. So I want you to hear the church at Portobello Baptist Church in 2026, this quirky little place on the east side of Edinburgh. Jesus loves you. There's nothing he's more delighted about. He's like, yes! Look at those people doing baptisms on the beach. with little rowing boats going across in the background. Singing songs on the beach, hearing stories of Jesus' work on the beach in front of people. Oh man, I love you guys. That's the depth of love and joy that Paul expresses towards the church in Thessalonica that I want you to hear me expressing to you guys. And Jesus has like 1 billion times more. Those times you feel alone, you feel a little bit like, oh, what am I going to do? And like, what? Jesus, you need to hear him. I love you. You are the crown that Paul will present and say, look, these folks, you have such dignity and beauty. Friends, may we be like Paul. Might we share the gospel? Might we be fruitful for the kingdom in the right way? May our motives be right. Might we share our very lives as a picture of the gospel, that people might be able to connect with it. And might we recognize that the very, very best things we will ever do are for his kingdom. Now, that's not to say, in fact, I really want this to be clear. This is not to say that the stuff that we do in here is the most important stuff. The most important things you do are where you're called into every single day. Where is it that God has called you to be tomorrow, or Tuesday, or Wednesday, or Thursday? And you carry the presence of Jesus in that place. You will be rubbing up against some people who have bought a Bible in the last year because they don't know what life means. Maybe you can be the answer to that. This is what we're called to. This is the very best thing we can do, because maybe you'll get to tell somebody about what was in the Bible, or maybe even you just get to tell them that they should start with the Gospel of Mark. That is the right answer, by the way. If that's all that you do, maybe one day you're going to be able to turn up and say, this is the crown. This person who asked me, and look at it now. It's remarkable what God is able to do. Let's pray together. Can I ask you to stand with me?